Welcome back to the Diamond Breakfast. Now, as reported previously, 3 Constitutional Court judges were suspended with immediate effect. This follows a recommendation in the report presented to President Dr. Hakainde Hichilema by the Judicial Complaints Commission. And from yesterday, the former Republican president held a presser at the PF Secretariat where he addressed the president suspending 3 court judges. And this comes days before his eligibility cases to be heard. And we get to see that will be happening later on. Now, this morning we get to speak with the UPND Legal Committee member in Honorable Dr. Clement Andeleki, who is with us to speak on this matter. He is Katombola constituency member of Parliament. Good morning, Doc.
Good morning. How is Diamond TV? And good morning, the people of Zambia.
We're okay. We are wondering, how is the UPND administration? Looks like you're coming under a lot of fire the last couple of days.
Of course, people throw stones on you when the mangoes are ready. Something's happening in the tree.
Well, it's been an interesting 24 hours. I mean, we did get to see, the former president and Dr. Edgar Lungu make some interesting remarks yesterday at the presser. He's called on lawyers to rise up and defend the judiciary following, of course, the suspension by the president. So what do you, I mean, he also cited quite a number of things. There's a lot of feeling that, the rule of law is being abused by the UPND administration. What are your sentiments on that?
Yeah, of course you can guess who ECL is. He's a former president. He's thinking he can come back. He's trying to ride on literally anything, to try and make milestones, when they come back, and it's surprising that he's quoting the suspension of the 3 judges and attributing it to the breakdown of the rule of law under the UPND, but he did not do the same to quote what he did and what Michael Sata did. He suspended, 3 judges in Supreme Court Judge Philip Msonda, Nigel Mtuna, and Charles Kajimanga. Remember the Chikopa Tribunal. It never brought in issues when Michael Sata did that. So you can guess those are just politics, and you're not speaking as a lawyer. Literally, he's out of the law this time. It's just political.
He's called on lawyers to rise up and defend the judiciary. Do you think the judiciary is compromised? Not at all.
The judiciary in Zambia is independent. We have adequate laws that regulate the judiciary, regulate all the people of Zambia. You know that there is a judicial code of conduct. It was not enacted by our president, the current president. When you look at the judicial code of conduct, it was developed by the judges themselves. And this was the first time we came out with a self-regulation law on judges was in 1996, through the Ministry of Legal Affairs then. And Vincent Malambo was actually Minister of Justice at the time. So they called it Ministry of Legal Affairs at the time. So we do have the Judicial Code of Conduct, which is in effect right now, and that is Act number 46. Act number 46 of 2008. So ultimately, what is there is that it's unfortunate that Edgar Lungu can come out like that. But we understand the desperation in him. The judiciary is independent. There is a constitution which was actually signed by himself, Edgar Chagwa Lungu, when he was president, on the 5th of January 2016. So the law that he signed is actually the law that is in motion. And I want to state very categorically that Zambia has high democratic credentials. And in terms of the judiciary is independent. It is independent, very, very independent. But that does not mean that the judiciary cannot be held accountable. Remember, judicial independence is not on its own a blanket immunity against holding judges accountable. Right now, the judges have been suspended and they have not been removed because the perception that has been created by PF is that the judges have been dismissed by President Hakainde Hichilema. That is not true. That is a mere misconception being created by PF. They have been suspended in accordance with the provisions of the law. When you look at Article 144, it makes provisions on 43 and 44 of the Constitution of Zambia. Amendment Act number 2 of 2016 makes provisions as to how an erring judge may be dealt with. You know, there are standards in which a judge must behave.
But then people feel, you know, because, you know, when you look at the Court judges, the appointment comes through from the president, but then you've got, you know, an issue that happened, you know, long ago where these three judges, you know, were the ones that were to be presiding over the petition that was laid out at that time, you know, coming through from your administration. Today, people feel like this is an act or a hand of the president being bitter because things did not go his way at the time when he was in opposition.
Not at all. These are just imaginations of few individuals in their mind. You see, what this has to do
But you can't deny that it looks like it makes some sense.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't make sense. You see, what is there is that when you're a judge, it doesn't mean you're immune. The issues about the conduct of the three judges has not been raised by the president. This is coming under a recommendation from the Judicial Conference Authority to the president that a prima facie case on a complaint laid against the three judges has been established, and the president has 7 days in which to suspend the judges. Once the judges have been suspended, it means they have been removed. They have been given an opportunity to clear themselves from the allegations that have been made. These are not the first judges to be suspended. You remember the issue of Nigel Mutuna. You remember the case of Charles Kajimanga. They went through the process. The only one of the three judges who decided to be faint-hearted and resigned was Philip Msonda. But the two judges, after being suspended, defended their matter, after being removed, defended their matter until they were reinstated. They had a good case, and the court, the structures of the judicial process exonerated them, and they continue serving as judges. So there should be nobody who is immune from being subjected to disciplinary proceedings. Everyone is a subject of the law, including ourselves as members of, including the speaker, including the president, including everybody. There is a law regulating them. So there is no way judges could claim themselves that they should be immune from being asked to account for their conduct. There is a standard of good behavior accepted of judges, and this is contained in the Bangalore Principles, which Zambia has subscribed to, the United Nations Basic Principles on Judicial Independence. Zambia has subscribed to it. We have a Judicial Code of Conduct. We have the Constitution. So the judges must behave within the parameters of that particular. We have good judges in the High Court, in the superior courts, and just starting from the subordinate, very good judges who are impartial. We do not want judges that take political sides.
But Dr. Ndeleki, when we look at this, you know, from the perspective also of you know, the citizen, this, you know, they looking at it from how could this be a possible coincidence? Because one, you do have former President Edgar Lungu's eligibility case coming up. These are some of the judges that sat the time that it was being deliberated on and did pass that he was eligible to stand. Now we're seeing that they have been suspended before we get to see, you know, again, this eligibility case come forward. Is it just a mere coincidence?
So are you saying,
could it be that these complaints were being administered by the UPND to the JCC so that you can put a stop to this?
Not at all. I think the Zambian people have an opportunity to check who the complainant is. The Zambian people know who is who. You know, it's if you are going to read the news at 19 hours and you do something wrong during the day, you can't say, because I was going to read the news, that's why I've removed me. There is no connection. You know, the issue of Edgar Lungu's coming back is neither here nor there. And sooner or later, we would obviously hear the court pronounce themselves. The bench, the bench is not just the three judges. You know, under the Constitution, we have currently 11 judges of that court, the Constitutional Court. So there's no way three judges would have any impact and people could stand and make noise, say, no, because there's going to be a hearing of this case. These judges are very important. No. If there is an allegation, a serious allegation, before the Judicial Conference Authority, there is no way the judges will not be given the opportunity to answer. They're allowed to answer.
So to clear this, you know, there's talks of this being held in camera. That means, you know, of course, even the media are not privy to the time of deliberation. Do you think this should have a sense of transparency? Press should be allowed to sit in and be able to hear whatever complaints have been brought forward should be made public to at least help maybe clear the president from looking like he is just being bitter or has a bitter vengeance against these three charges?
Let me tell you the one thing about this president. This president, I can say, is a very different president. If it was other people becoming president with the treatment that he went through, I don't think some of the Zambians would be here today. They would be dead. But he's not like that. I think this president has been president from 2021. If there was no complaint, there are 3 years down the line there's a complaint. What, do you want the president to go and become himself presiding officer before the JCC? It's not possible. This president, the 3 years he's been in office, we've not seen him follow on anyone at all. Even those people who locked him, even people who broke his home, locked him up for treason, these offenses which are neither here nor there. I think you can attest to the life of this president. I'm not necessarily there to show that he's clean, but I think the Zambian people know who he is. You saw what used to happen to his life. He could be beaten, you saw what he went through. Surely, if he was a president for vengeance like other people, I don't think that some of the people would be here today.
All right, I believe we also have Mr. George Chisanga joining us via Zoom in a little bit, so I guess we will get to speak with him soon. But, looking at this matter, former president has made it clear that come 2026 he's ready to be on the ballot. What is your reaction to that?
Yeah, he is free. He's a citizen to imagine anything. We have a law. Zambia is not a banana republic. We have a law which was promulgated by him. It was assented to by him. When you look at the constitution, the question is he able to stand? He can say, dreamland is free. You can dream to fly a plane, you can dream anything. And we take it that is just politicking. President Edgar Chagwa.
When you say you take it is just politicking, you think come 2026 his name is not going to be on the ballot?
I'm not the judge. The matter is before court on whether he's eligible or not. But from my perception, being a lawyer, from the law that is available, Edgar Lungu was not elected under the 2016 constitution. That's what you should know. He was elected when Michael Sata died under the constitution that was existing as of 2015. During that particular period, he held office as president. Article 102 of the Constitution of Zambia, which he himself signed, Edgar Lungu, on 5th January 2016, says a person who has twice held office as president is not eligible. The issue is, did he hold office twice? The answer is affirmative. It's true that he did hold office twice. That's why when he was elected in 2016, he said, having been re-elected president, meaning he was elected before he held office. It's just common knowledge, and you don't need to be a lawyer to understand that Edgar Lungu did hold office as president. He was president. And he cannot, can you imagine the maximum, even as an ordinary lay person, law is straight. It's not like physics, chemistry, things you can't see the molecules. Law is straightforward. The question
sometimes it's not as straightforward. It's why people feel that there are so many lacunas within the Constitution.
I'll simplify it for you. What is the maximum term a president can hold in Zambia? It's 10 years. Now, how many years did Edgar Lungu save? He saved 7 years. Now, imagining that he's made eligible, which he is not, and he will happen to win in future, he would have saved 12 years or more. Is that legal? Even to your common knowledge, your common sense, it will be more than 10 years. So no president can save more than 10 years under the current law, under the amended law, which was the Constitution of Zambia of 1991 as amended by Act number 18 of 1996. A person who is president can only hold the office as president for a maximum of 10 years. So Lungu saved 7 years. If he was given an illegal term of 5 years, he would have saved 12 years. That is against the law. You don't need to be a lawyer to understand that a maximum a president, from the time Levi Mwanawasa took over as president, the maximum a president can save is 10 years. He's trying to use impunity to try and force himself on the ballot. But there is a law. And the law will be defended to the latter. We are all sworn. I am chairman for the legal committee at Parliament. I am also a member of the legal committee in the UPND. There is a law. I am also a lawyer in this republic. There is a law.
We do have faction chairman for legal affairs, Mr. George Chisanga, also on the line. Good morning to you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. I believe you've also been listening into some of the remarks from the doc, but I'd like to also get your reaction. Well, let's start it off from here. We understand during the presser that was held yesterday, former president did make it very clear that he is going to be on the ballot come 2026. But of course, people feel he might just be speaking prematurely as we await to hear what the conclusion will be in his eligibility case.
Well, I didn't hear much of what Honorable Andeleki said, if you can hear me.
Okay.
Because I think I indicated on the phone that there's too much feedback from the studio.
Right.
So I was barely hearing what Honorable Andeleki was saying.
Okay.
But you see, the issue at hand that we need to address is really whether what has transpired in the last now 48 hours is something that a country that professes to be a constitutional democracy can be proud about, or whether a country that professes to be a constitutional democracy can be ashamed about. Mm-hmm. And I must say immediately that anybody and everybody who has considered what has happened in the last 48 hours has drawn the conclusion that what the president has done is embarrassing, it's unconstitutional, and it should not have happened. And I'm referring to the issue of the suspension of 3 constitutional court judges who are scheduled tomorrow to join their colleagues in hearing the matter that has raised more controversies, not because of the matter itself, but because of the political gymnastics that are taking place around that case. This case of eligibility was a litmus test of our constitutional democracy back in 2016 when it took place. And the Constitutional Court, applying itself to the issues that were raised and canvassed before it, made a determination. In the country must respect and also follow, whether or not you agree with it. But anybody who has genuinely and objectively analyzed the judgment of the Constitutional Court in 2016 and who has looked at the constitutional order that existed between the 2 constitutions that were being considered by the Constitutional Court at that time, will have drawn the conclusion that the Constitutional Court was right. The bits that I heard from Honorable Andeleki spoke about the fact that under the 2 constitutions,
well, it looks like we are having a slight network challenge there for the...
Even taking this argument away from the Constitution and trying to bring in the individual of Edgar Lungu.
I'll need you to pause just there. I'll need you to just double back a little bit. We lost you there for a second, so we didn't get to hear what you were saying as you were addressing Honorable Andeleki.
Okay, I was saying, the piece of what I heard from Mr. Andeleki was that under the 2 constitutional orders,
I don't know if people are watching and trying to call Mr. Chisanga, but please stop calling him. Would like to hear what he has to say on this matter.
Okay, so even taking it away from now the Constitution and just using logic and bringing in the individual of Edgar Chagwarungu and asking a child who's in kindergarten who was following the years that Mr. Lungu served in office, they will conclude without any difficulty that Dr. Lungu served a total of 7 years. That meant he had a remnant of another 3 years to qualify to hit the 10 years that is provided for in the Constitution. But if you even went ahead and analyzed what the Constitutional Court said at that time, they said in their interpretation of the Constitution, it has a possibility where a person who occupies the presidency after the passing on of another president who was in office and serves for a lesser period than 2 years would actually totally save a period of 12 years in the office of a president because of allowing for him to take over the remainder of the term, which is not considered a term to his credit when he takes over office. That reasoning was very sound. And any lawyer who has looked at that reasoning cannot begin to question the issue of eligibility currently.
Well, we do have a lawyer here who is questioning just that. He's saying no.
There's no.
I'll leave it to you. What is your response now to that?
I'm sure the problem that I'm having, I would have wished that Honorable George Sanga is here. The issues we are talking about, he mentioned something to say what the current president did is unconstitutional. I don't know which constitution is quoting, and I would have wished him, you know, as lawyers, we quote the law. I have already quoted to you the provisions of the Constitution, which is saying the president's decision, our president, the current president, Hakainde Hichilema's decision to suspend the judges was unconstitutional. Which lawyer says that? Which provision of the Constitution did the president violate? And I would have wished him to state which provision of the Constitution was violated. Now, he's saying Edgar Lungu can save more than 10 years. Which law is that? Which would allow a president? Which law? We should quote which law allows after 2001. Which president has been allowed before to save more than 10 years? Because the maximum a president would save is 10 years and below. So that kind of thinking is political reasoning. Which section or article of the law allows a president currently to save more than 10 years? Let's
give a chance to Mr. Sangad as well to be able to respond to that.
Well, look, the difficulty I'm having with Honorable Ndeleki is that he is trying to divorce this debate from what actually transpired on the ground. This debate can only be appreciated if one looks at the fact that we had two straddled constitutional orders, like reasoned by the court of the Constitutional Court when they heard in this matter. Under the previous constitutional order, a transition in the office of a president was different. Under the new constitutional order, the transition in the office of president became different because under the new constitutional order, a vice president takes over without any by-election. So the Constitutional Court was challenged with the possibility of reconciling the two constitutional orders. And they argued reasonably that when you have, what we had was a straddled constitutional order. We are dealing with an individual who was asked to get into office under an old constitutional order and who had to continue his presidency under the new constitutional order. I know Mr. Ndeleki has read that ruling, and I'm not being political. I have never debated constitutional matters within the framework of politics myself. I'm being extremely constitutional. The Constitutional Court reasoned on these two straddled constitutional orders and placed the individual who found himself taking over in the old constitutional order and continuing the new constitutional order, and established in their reasoning, in interpreting the process of the Constitution. I might not be able to resolve to deal with them directly yet, because I'm not sitting with the Constitution. But I know that the reasoning I've got, accords with what is already in the two constitutional orders. And in the reasoning of the Constitutional Court, they say there is a possibility in interpreting this process of the Constitution that a person who takes over barely less than 2 years before the end of the tenure of the president whose presidency he took over can then remain in office for 12 years because the 2 years that he serves is not credited to him. And this is reasoning, this is logic, this is actually constitutional interpretation. The 2 years that he served in office cannot be credited to him because that is what the Constitution dictated. Like I said, if I was given the opportunity to come to the studio next time and I read you the constitutional provisions and showed you the section of the judgment where this reasoning was extrapolated, you will agree that there is a possibility of a president who is elected to go, under the old constitution, who had been elected to go and serve less than 2 years of the previous president who dies, to remain in office for 12 years. It is there in the judgment. What I think our colleagues are doing, they are placing Dr. Lungu as an individual in the case. We are not dealing with the principles. Let's deal with the principles and explain to the Zambians under the constitutional order. In fact, this anomaly has been dealt with, and the Constitutional Court was alive to that fact, that under the new constitutional order, these problems should not arise and will never arise again. Because under the new constitutional order, if a president dies, the president takes over. But peradventure, if the president takes over, the president also takes over and serves only for 1 year, are you going to tell me that it's constitutional for him to remain in office only for 6 years? Because the same constitution says those years that he served shall less than 24 months cannot be credited to him to determine a term of the president. You can't ignore that. And it's not political to say this is what is contained in the constitution.
Now, I also want to just bring it to you, Honorable. Do you feel or think that there is, a serious gap in understanding the previous and the current constitution, marrying the two?
There's nothing. That's the reason why we are lawyers.
Is that my question?
We are lawyers.
No, I've passed it on to Honorable Andeleki here. And I'll come to you after that, yeah.
We are lawyers. Right. We are lawyers. We work with the law. There is no law which allows, in the Constitution of Zambia or any other law in the Republic of Zambia, which allows a president to serve more than 10 years. And I've challenged Honorable George Sanga to tell me which part of the Constitution talks of that. He's referring to a judgment as his authority. Now, that judgment, that's why I always encourage people to read. The problem of not reading is that you get what people are saying as gospel truth. The judgment that went before court, which is one of the reasons people are being made to answer now, these suspended judges. The issue that was there was that there was an application that was made by Dan Pule and his team, raising a hypothetical question before the Corn Court, it was nothing to do with Edgar Lungu. People are trying to claim, no, it was resolved it was Edgar Lungu was eligible. No, it never dealt with Edgar Lungu's eligibility. The case of Dan Pule never dealt with Edgar Lungu's situation. It was asking a hypothetical question. That hypothetical question which was asked, when it went to the Corn Court, now that's where the misconduct begins, decides to frame in their own question. That is not allowed under the laws. If I sue you for something, the court should not add whatever reliefs that you should have been asking. This is a problem of misconduct of judges. Now, when it went before the Corn Court, they never dealt with Edgar Lungu. The current matter before court is dealing with the eligibility of Edgar Chagwa Lungu as to whether he is eligible, whether he was eligible to stand in 2021, whether he will be eligible in future elections. Very, very candid.
Looking at the previous constitution and some of the elements it highlights, it does seem that, do we just rubbish that off? Because, again, you're looking at a time where he did pick up from a past president, and then you've got now a constitution that, is different to what it was saying at the time that he came into power. There
is nothing that is different. When Edgar Lungu took over office in 2015, there was a constitution which amounted to the fact that you have served office. Whether you have served one day under that constitution, it was a term. It constituted serving office. The issue is not how long the term is. The question was, have you held office? When you look at Article 102, it talks of a person who has twice held office as president. Twice held, not term, nothing to do with term. Those are issues now that they are trying to bring to say it was a short term, it was a half term. There's nothing to do with term in Article 102. It is categorical, it is very clear that a person who has twice held office as president is not eligible to stand. Article 102 of the Constitution. Did Edgar Lungu hold office in 2015 as a president? He held office as president. Did he hold office in 2016 as president? He held office. He twice held office, thereby qualifying the provisions of Article 102 of the Constitution of Zambia, or Amendment Act number 2 of 2016. So it qualifies. So the issues that Honorable George Sanga is talking about, he's saying, I don't have the Constitution. The Constitution is in our heads. That's why we are lawyers. It's like a pastor who says, I wish I had a Bible. The pastors know the Bible because they are pastors. We are lawyers. I'm asking which law would allow Edgar Lungu to serve more than 10 years? Which part of the Constitution, whether the old Constitution, the amended Constitution, or the current Constitution? He should tell us which Constitution says that. Let's not support illegality. We are lawyers. If you have held office 10 years or below, you are out of it. Have you held office twice? You've held office twice. So if Edgar Lungu thinks he'll use impunity, not around this time. The issue of impunity is long gone, and you will not use it this time around.
I'll leave it at there with you, Honorable Andeleki, but let's bring it back now to Honorable Chisanga. If you could, your reaction anyway, as we get to conclude.
Okay, look, Honorable Andeleki is proffering a restricted interpretation of the constitutional clause he's referring to. he has not referred you to the proviso in the Constitution. I am actually, analyzing this based on the judgment that I read, and that judgment referred to specific clauses in the Constitution. He is not answering the part that deals with how do you treat an individual under the old constitutional order who takes over presidency less than 2 years before the end of the term of the president who died. He is not addressing that. And I know he is not addressing that deliberately, because if he addresses that, he will be compelled to agree with the reasoning of the Constitutional Court in the matter of Dan Pule that he keeps referring to. The court in Dan Pule's case said, and they asked this question: how do we treat the individual who finds himself in the circumstances that President Edgar Lungu at that time found himself in, i.e., he found himself in the office of a president, having succeeded President Michael Sat under the old constitutional order. The old constitution had a provision. Yes, it defined terms, but it had a proviso that said if a person is elected to go and finish a term of a president who died in office, and that period which remains is less than 2 years, that period is not going to be, to be credited to the succeeding president for purposes of determining the tenure of office of the 5 years. So the 10-year term is provided for in the Constitution, yes. But there's an expectation, and I had argued this before. I said, look, under the old constitutional order, it should not have been problematic for somebody like Edgar Lungu, who knew that he was a sellable candidate at that time, to express reservation that, look, if I go in and only serve less than 2 years, they will credit it to me, and therefore I'll only be able to serve 7 years and I want to meet the 10-year mark. Mr. Ndereki has fixated himself on 10 years. He is not talking about the problem that we create if we allow somebody who is entitled to 10 years to serve only 7 years. I hope you're following the logic. And the Constitutional Court addressed itself to these issues. Mr. Ndereki is deliberately not talking about the fact that this court was numbered with a very unique problem of dealing with two constitutional orders. One which allowed a by-election and of a vice president of a president to come and finish a term, and a by-election that takes place less than 2 years before the end of the tenure of the president. And then what happens subsequently, assuming within the Act number 2. Act number 2 cured that mischief. Act number 2 then allows that the vice president will simply stretch into that office and go and finish that term. And quite frankly, even Act number 2 itself provides that if the vice president gets into the office of president, serves for less than 2 years, you won't credit it to his term, because the target is 10 years. But like I said, judges are employed to reason, they're employed to think, and they're employed to cure problems that arise when you are faced with a crisis under the Constitution. And frankly speaking, we were faced with a crisis under the Constitution, and this is what I want Ndereki to address himself to, even if he's supporting those problems that he's supporting. We were faced with a scenario where that we straddled between two constitutional orders. That was very fundamental in the reasoning of the court. And they needed to address that. And what is happening now, what the UPND government is trying to do now by returning to court to go and determine this eligibility, is exactly what the Constitutional Court was trying to avoid us doing as a nation. We are bogging ourselves down by even going back to court to consider the issues of eligibility. Because they reasoned at that time, and they said clearly that when we had a scenario that Dr. Lungu found himself in, then there's a possibility that a president can remain in office for 12 years. I am not the one who's saying that. Mr. Ndereki is wrong to accuse me of misinterpreting the Constitution. I am agreeing with the reasoning of the Constitutional Court, because I find that reasoning sound, because they are addressing themselves to a complication that arises when you have to straddle yourself through two constitutional orders.
Right.
This is the issue that the UPND are not addressing. But let me first address myself to the issue of eligibility.
In conclusion,
my worry with what we are politicizing and we are personalizing the arguments on eligibility. This matter has come before the courts of law. The courts of law have already determined this matter. Even to bring it back to court when circumstances have not changed is wrong. But most importantly, even the actions of the president, and this is why Mr. Ndereki is thinking that I accuse the president of acting unconstitutional. Have you heard how many Zambians have analyzed the circumstances under which the president has elected to exercise his constitutional power and suspend these judges? Yes, the president has got powers. Why are we posting the excess of power on the circumstances surrounding the controversy of eligibility, which case is coming back to court for the 5th time when the court has already made its decision very clear on that? And also, most important, we should, I don't know that this issue, we should go to the issue of why has it become imperative or necessary for this Judicial Complaints Commission today to recommend the suspension of these judges 2 days before they are scheduled to sit to hear the case of eligibility. And remember, the Constitution empowers the JCC to recommend to the president a suspension of judges if they establish a prima facie case that these judges misconducted themselves.
Right.
Now, these cases have come to the JCC.
We'll need you to conclude on just that, Honorable Chisanga. I think this is where we need to close it up with you. You need to come back, I guess. You need to come back on the Diamond Breakfast. Would love to host the both of you once again, especially after this case has been heard after today. I hope you will be able to join us in studio. Right. Now, as we get to conclude, Honorable Ndeleki, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that I would have loved us to engage as lawyers. I have a situation where I'm engaging a politician and not a lawyer. You know, we have the law in this country. He's saying the Constitutional Court had a problem of how to transition the old constitution and this constitution. That's not true. The law has always been clear. We have had a constitution since 1964. We have had our own Zambian constitution. So the constitution, the way it provided at the time, before the Amendment Act number 2, even if you serve 1 day, it is a term. You have held office. It's about holding office. So he's divorcing himself from interpreting the provision of Article 102, which I thought, being former last president, would come and address Article 102 says this, holding office, a person has twice held office. The issue is about twice held office. And the issue of the suspension of those judges by the JCC, they have been properly suspended. They have been given an opportunity to go and explain themselves, regardless of whether the matter will come. We still have 8 judges remaining.
Right.
That's a good number. They can hear that matter of eligibility. There's nothing special about eligibility case. It's like any other case before court.
Honorable Clement Ndeleki, UPND Legal Committee member and also Katombola Member of Parliament, thank you for being with us this morning. They say there's 3 sides to a coin. Well, we've got to listen to the legal side of the UPND and also the legal side of the Patriotic Front. We'll leave the middle to you. And I'd also like to thank Honorable George Chisanga as well for being part of us. He is, of course, the Patriotic Front Peer Faction Chairman for Legal Affairs. The side in which you want to see or follow is really up to you. And we'll take a short break, and on the other side, we continue with the Diamond Breakfast.